Hello viewers, welcome to Sleepy Mind channel. Tonight we'll be exploring one of the most topic, tear. Biologically, your body produces three distinct types of tears, each with a different chemical signature and purpose. 1. Basal tears. These are the maintenance tears. They are constantly in your eyes, forming a thin, three-layered film that protects the cornea from dust and prevents it from drying out. 2. Reflex tears. These are the emergency tears. When you chop an onion or get a speck of grit in your eye, your sensory nerves send a panic signal to the brain, which floods the eye with liquid to wash away the irritant. 3. Emotional, psychogenic tears. These are unique to humans. Triggered by the limbic system, these contain significantly higher levels of hormones and toxins. Imagine the elegance of this system. While your body is a machine that needs oil, basal, and a cleaning spray, reflex, it is also a vessel for a soul. When the weight of the world becomes too much, your body transitions from mechanical maintenance to emotional release. The same physical hardware that keeps your vision clear during a walk in the park is the same hardware that allows you to express the depth of your heartbreak at a funeral. We are the only creatures where a biological cleaning fluid is also a sacred language of the heart. Emotional tears are chemically heavy. They contain high concentrations of adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH, which is linked to high stress levels, and leucine and enkephalin, a natural opiate that reduces pain. When we cry emotionally, we are literally excreting stress-related chemicals that have built up in our system. We often apologize for crying, saying, "I'm sorry, I'm being a mess," but science tells us the opposite. When you cry, you aren't being a mess. You are cleaning the house. You are purging the chemical leftovers of anxiety and sorrow. Every tear that rolls down your cheek is a tiny package of stress being escorted out of your body. This is why we feel that profound, hollow peace after a long sob. It is the feeling of a chemically balanced brain. When a tear is dried and viewed under a high-powered electron microscope, it reveals a complex landscape. This is because the salts and minerals in the tear crystallize into unique patterns. Fascinatingly, a tear of grief looks entirely different from a tear of joy. Photographer Rosalind Fisher captured these topographies, showing that a tear shed from laughter looks like a symmetrical aerial view of a flourishing city, while a tear of grief looks like a jagged, barren forest or a fractured coastline. This suggests that our emotions have their own geometry. Your dukh, sorrow, and your khushi, joy, don't just feel different. They look different at the atomic level. Even if you try to hide your feelings, your molecules are busy drawing maps of your soul. If you look closely at the inner corner of your eyelid, you will see a tiny, microscopic hole called the lacrimal punctum. This is the drain of your eye. Most of your tears don't actually fall down your face. They are sucked into these holes, travel through the nasolacrimal duct, and empty into your nose. This explains the runny nose that always accompanies a good cry. But more deeply, it reflects how interconnected our pain is. Our eyes, our nose, and our throat all join together in a symphony of sorrow. We often try to sniffle away our tears to hide them, but that very act is just our body's plumbing trying to process the overflow of our emotions. Your body is designed to absorb your pain as much as it is designed to release it. Biologically, women have 60% more prolactin than men. Prolactin is a hormone that stimulates the production of tears. Conversely, men have higher levels of testosterone, which acts as a biological brake on the tear glands. Until puberty, boys and girls cry at almost the exact same rate. It is only when these hormones kick in that the crying gap widens. For centuries, we have told men that boys don't cry, as if it were a choice of character. But the truth is, men are fighting an uphill battle against their own testosterone. When a man finally breaks down and cries, it is a testament to the sheer power of his emotion. It has fought through a biological barrier designed to keep it in. For both men and women, a tear isn't a sign of gendered weakness. It's a sign that the hormone-driven walls of the body have been breached by the intensity of the spirit. The cornea, the clear front part of your eye, is the only part of the human body that has no blood vessels. If it had blood vessels, your vision would be blurry and red. Instead, the cornea breathes through your tears. Tears provide a smooth optical surface and deliver oxygen directly from the air into the eye tissue. This is a beautiful paradox. We need tears to see clearly. If your eyes were perfectly dry, your world would be a dark, opaque blur. In life, we often think that our tears cloud our vision, but biologically, they are what make vision possible. It is a metaphor for life. Sometimes we have to go through the wetness of emotion to truly see the world for what it is. Tears contain a powerful enzyme called lysozyme. This enzyme is so effective that it can destroy 90% to 95% of bacteria in just 5 to 10 minutes. It works by dissolving the cell walls of bacteria on contact. Every time you blink, you are giving your eyes a holy water bath. You are constantly surrounded by invisible threats, dust, germs, and pollution, but you carry a pharmacy in your eyelids. Your tears are not just a reaction to pain. They are a proactive shield of love from your body to your brain, ensuring that the windows to your soul stay protected from the grime of the world. A single tear is actually a sandwich of 3 layers. 1. The mucin layer, bottom, a sticky mucus that glues the tear to the eyeball. 2. The aqueous layer, middle, the water that keeps everything hydrated. 3. The lipid layer, top, an oily seal that prevents the water from evaporating. This is nature's perfect engineering. Without that tiny, thin layer of oil on top, your tears would vanish into the air before they could do their job. It reminds us that even our most liquid and fragile moments are held together by a complex structure. We are never just falling apart. Even in our breakdown, there is a sophisticated architecture holding us together. Crocodiles do actually weep, but not because they are sad. As they eat, they swallow large amounts of air, which puts pressure on their sinuses and triggers their tear glands. This is a purely mechanical reflex tear. Humans are the only creatures who have taken this mechanical reflex and turned it into a weapon of manipulation. While the crocodile's tears are honest biology, the human fake cry is a complex social maneuver. It shows how far we have come from the animal kingdom. We have taken a biological function and turned it into an art form, for better or for worse. Newborn babies scream and wail, but they don't produce actual teardrops. Their lacrimal glands are not fully developed at birth. They can only produce enough moisture to keep the eye damp. Real, rolling teardrops don't appear until the baby is between 1 and 3 months old. There is something hauntingly pure about a baby's first real tear. For the first few weeks, their cry is just a sound, a demand for food or comfort. But when that first glistening drop finally rolls down their cheek, it marks the moment they transition from a biological being to an emotional one. It is the first time their internal world becomes visible to the outside. Biologically, tears serve as a physical signal that overrides words. When we cry, our vision becomes blurred, effectively disarming us. This state of temporary helplessness is a powerful evolutionary tool. It triggers mirror neurons in the observer, forcing them to experience a sympathetic response. In prehistoric tribes, this was a vital nonverbal signal to cease aggression and provide care. Tears are the ultimate white flag of the human spirit. In a world that demands we be strong and armored, a tear is a crack in the porcelain. It is the moment we stop pretending. It is the silent plea that says, "I cannot carry this weight alone anymore." It is the bridge that connects two lonely souls without a single word being spoken. We don't cry to push people away, we cry to pull them in. What we call an ugly cry involves the involuntary contraction of the corrugator supercilii, the brow muscles, and the depressor anguli oris, the muscles that pull the corners of the mouth down. Because these muscles are difficult to control through sheer willpower, a contorted face is seen by the human brain as a marker of high sincerity. There is a strange, raw beauty in the ugly cry. It is the moment when vanity dies. When you are sobbing so hard that your face twists and your breath hitches, you are at your most honest. You no longer care how you look to the world. You only care about what you feel. It is the shedding of the social mask, and in that vulnerability, there is a profound dignity that a composed face can never match. Many people experience a hangover, feeling after an intense bout of crying. Puffy eyes, a dull headache, and a sense of deep lethargy. This is caused by the massive activation of the parasympathetic nervous system, PNS. After the storm of the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, passes, the PNS overcompensates to bring the body back to a state of rest. This lethargy is nature's way of tucking you into bed. The hangover isn't a sign of sickness. It's a sign of recovery. Your body has spent an incredible amount of energy processing an emotional trauma, and now it is demanding the silence and darkness it needs to rebuild. It is the hibernation of the soul after a long winter of sorrow. Crying stimulates the vagus nerve, the longest nerve of the autonomic nervous system. This nerve reaches from the brainstem down to the heart and the gut. When stimulated by the rhythmic sobbing and deep breathing of crying, the vagus nerve releases a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, which slows the heart rate and induces a state of calm. We often think of crying as an out-of-control state, but it is actually your body's way of regaining control. Every sob is a physical tug on your heartstrings, literally slowing the beat of your chest. Your body is holding your hand, breathing with you, and forcing you to slow down when your mind is racing. Why do we cry at weddings or when a child is born or after a massive achievement? Psychologists call this a dimorphous expression. When the brain is overwhelmed by too much positive emotion, it becomes unstable. To restore balance, the brain triggers a sad response, tears, to cancel out the intensity of the joy, bringing you back to a manageable baseline. It reminds us that the human heart is a delicate instrument with a limited capacity. Sometimes the joy is so great that our cup simply cannot hold it. We leak happiness so that we don't shatter from the pressure of it. To cry at a wedding is to admit that you love someone so much that your biology has run out of ways to describe it. Music often triggers tears because of a structural device called an appoggiatura. This is a leaning note that creates a slight dissonance, a tension that clashes with the melody before resolving into a harmonious note. This cycle of tension and release mimics the sound of a human voice cracking during a sob. Music is the external version of our tears. It finds the frequencies of our pain that we cannot name and coaxes them out of hiding. A song is often just a tear that has found a melody. When we cry to a song, we aren't just crying for the music. We are crying because the music told us it was safe to let go. When we see someone else cry, our premotor cortex activates. We don't just observe their sadness. We physically simulate it in our own brains. This is the biological basis for empathy. If we didn't have the ability to cry, our ability to understand and mirror the pain of others would be significantly diminished. Tears are the thread that sews the fabric of humanity together. When you cry in front of someone, you are handing them a map of your internal world and asking them to walk through it with you. And because of their mirror neurons, they do walk with you. Your tears turn a stranger into a brother. Emotional tears contain higher levels of manganese and potassium. Research suggests that these minerals are linked to mood regulation and sleep cycles. By shedding these minerals through tears, the body may be preparing itself for a deeper, more restorative sleep. There is a reason why a good cry is often followed by the best sleep of your life. You have cleared the chemical fog. You have laid down the heavy minerals of your day. You are going to sleep lighter than you were when the sun was up. Tears are sticky. Because of the mucin layer, the bottom layer of the tear film, tears have a higher viscosity than plain water. This allows them to cling to the skin and roll down the cheek slowly rather than just splashing off. The slow roll of a tear is what makes it so dramatic. Because they are designed to stick to us, they force us to feel them as they travel. They linger on the skin like a cold touch, making the internal emotion a physical reality. You can't ignore a tear once it has left the eye. It demands to be felt. In ancient Rome and during the Victorian era, tear bottles or lacrimatories were common. Mourners would collect their tears in these small glass vials and place them in the tombs of the deceased as a symbol of their devotion. It was believed that the more tears you saved, the more significant your love was. We have always looked for ways to save our pain, to prove that our love was real because our tears were many. A bottle of tears is a testament. I was here, I loved, and I felt. It is the most intimate souvenir a human being can leave behind. While tears look like clear water, they carry a chemical scent that humans detect subconsciously. A study published in Science found that the smell of emotional tears, specifically those shed from sadness, can actually lower levels of testosterone and reduce sexual arousal in men. This is nature's way of shifting the atmosphere. When a person cries, the chemical signal sent to those around them isn't one of attraction, but one of nurturing. The tear acts as a biological reset for the people in the room, moving the focus away from aggression or desire and toward empathy and protection. It is an invisible plea for a safe space. Ever wondered why your throat feels like it's closing up when you try to hold back tears? This is called the globus sensation. When you are stressed, your autonomic nervous system opens your glottis, the opening between your vocal cords, to allow more oxygen in. But when you try to swallow or speak through the tears, you are forcing the glottis to close against that pressure. The lump is the physical manifestation of the battle between your mind and your body. Your body wants to scream and breathe. Your mind wants to stay silent and composed. That ache in your throat is the cost of holding it all in. It is the weight of the words you are choosing not to say. While tears are evolved as a social signal, a vast majority of crying episodes happen when we are alone. Psychologically, self-crying acts as a form of self-soothing. By physically enacting the grief, the brain can finally begin to process the trauma that it was trying to ignore while in public. There is a specific hollow sound to a tear hitting a pillow in an empty room. Private tears are the most honest. In public, we cry for help. In private, we cry for ourselves. It is a ritual of self-parenting, where we allow our body to grieve the things our pride won't acknowledge. Immediately after crying, the brain releases a surge of endorphins and oxytocin, the love hormone. This is why, after the initial exhaustion of a sob, people often feel a sudden sense of mental clarity or a blank slate feeling. It's like the air after a summer thunderstorm. The humidity has broken, and the sky is suddenly sharp. After a deep cry, the problems that seemed insurmountable often look smaller. The tears didn't solve the problem, but they washed the lens, allowing you to see the solution that was there all along. Because of its unique three-layer structure, a tear has a specific refractive index, about 1.33, similar to water but slightly different due to the salts. When you have a filmy eye before a tear falls, your vision blurs because the liquid is literally changing the way light enters your pupil. When we say vision is blurred by tears, it is a literal physical truth. The world becomes a soft, glowing impressionist painting. Perhaps this is nature's way of giving us a break, by blurring the harsh reality of the world for a few moments so we can focus entirely on our internal healing. Humans are susceptible to contagious crying. Just like yawning, seeing someone else's eyes well up can trigger your own lacrimal glands. This is driven by the anterior cingulate cortex, the part of the brain that processes both your own pain and the observed pain of others. This is the golden thread of humanity. It means your pain is never truly yours alone. If you cry in a room of people who love you, the room begins to vibrate with that same frequency. It is the most primal form of "I hear you." Like the water we discussed earlier, tears contain isotopes that reflect the environment and the diet of the person. A scientist could theoretically analyze a tear to determine what part of the world the person has been living in or what they have been eating. Your tears are a passport of the heart. They carry the chemical signature of the home you grew up in and the water you drank while you were falling in love. You are literally crying out bits of your past. While most crying is involuntary, instrumental crying is a learned behavior where tears are used to gain an advantage. This is often seen in early childhood, the fake tantrum, but can persist into adulthood. The brain's prefrontal cortex is much more active during instrumental crying than during genuine emotional weeping. We all know the hollow feeling of a fake tear. It lacks the viscosity and the heat of the real thing. It is a shadow of an emotion. However, even fake tears are a sign of a desperate need for something, whether it be attention, safety, or power. As we age, the meibomian glands, which produce the oil layer of tears, begin to atrophy. This leads to tears that evaporate too quickly, causing chronic dry eyes. Ironically, this often makes people water more, as the brain sends emergency reflex signals to compensate for the lack of basal moisture. It is a cruel irony of aging. As we accumulate more life, more stories, and more reasons to cry, our bodies become less efficient at the act. An elderly person's watery eyes are often a sign of a body struggling to protect the windows of a soul that has seen a century of history in zero gravity. Tears do not fall. They do not roll down the cheek. Instead, due to surface tension, they form a growing liquid ball that stays stuck to the eye. If an astronaut cries too much, the ball of water can actually cover their nose and mouth, creating a drowning hazard. In space, your grief can literally kill you. Without the grace of gravity to take the weight of your tears away, they simply cling to you, growing larger and heavier. It is the ultimate metaphor for carried grief, the pain that doesn't go away, but simply stays stuck to your face until it consumes you. In many ancient cultures, including Egyptian, Greek, and Chinese societies, Morologists or professional mourners were hired to weep at funerals. Their job was to provide a cathartic atmosphere. They were trained to wail, tear their hair, and produce tears on command to elevate the social status of the deceased. It seems strange to pay for tears, but these cultures understood something we have forgotten. Grief is heavy, and sometimes we are too exhausted to carry it alone. The professional mourner was a vessel for the community's unspoken pain. They provided a rhythm of sorrow that allowed the family to simply be, while someone else did the work of weeping. It was a communal act of emotional labor. In medieval Christian mysticism, there was a concept called the donum lacrimarum, or the gift of tears. It wasn't seen as a sign of depression, but as a sign of extreme spiritual purity and a direct connection to the divine. Catherine of Siena and Saint Ignatius of Loyola reportedly wept so much during prayer that they feared for their eyesight. These saints didn't view tears as a lack of control, but as a washing of the soul. They believed that when words were insufficient to describe the glory or the pain of the world, God gave us tears as a higher form of language. It was the liquid grace that allowed the human spirit to communicate with the infinite. Chemical irritants like CS gas, tear gas, specifically target the TRPA1 and TRPV1 receptors in the eyes and nose. These receptors are designed to detect fire and smoke. When triggered, the brain perceives a burning threat and initiates a massive, violent reflex tear response to flush the chemical out. It is a dark irony that we have engineered weapons to force the body into its most vulnerable state. In a protest or a conflict, the forced tear is a symbol of powerlessness. While an emotional tear is an act of internal release, a chemical tear is an act of external violation. It is the body being forced to grieve for a threat it cannot see. The 19th century stiff upper lip philosophy, particularly in British culture, was a socio-biological experiment in suppression. By training boys to never show emotion, they were effectively training their brains to downregulate the limbic system's connection to the lacrimal glands. This era turned the face into a fortress. But when you build a wall around your tears, you also build a wall around your empathy. The stiff upper lip didn't stop the pain. It just forced it to go inward, leading to a generation of people who expressed their sorrow through silence, distance, and physical illness. A tear suppressed is not a tear gone. It is a tear waiting for a different exit. Why do we cry for people who don't exist? This is called narrative transport. When we become lost in a story, the brain's oxytocin levels spike, making us feel an actual bond with the fictional character. When they suffer, our brain processes it as a loss of a friend. Movies are the only place where many people feel safe enough to cry. The darkness of the theater provides a mask, and the fictional story provides a reason. Often, we aren't crying for the character on the screen. We are using their story as a safe passage to cry for the things in our own lives that we aren't allowed to weep for in the daylight. In modern politics, the single tear has become a powerful rhetorical tool. Research shows that a leader who shows a controlled tear is perceived as more relatable and trustworthy. However, if they sob, they are perceived as weak. It is a razor-thin line of social optics. We look for the shimmer in the eye of our leaders. We want to know that they are still human behind the policy and the power. That tiny glint of moisture is the proof of life. It tells us that despite the cold machinery of government, there is still a heart that beats for the people. In cases of severe clinical depression or anhedonia, a person may find themselves physically unable to cry. The emotional numbness becomes so profound that the lacrimal system disconnects entirely. This is often more distressing to the patient than the crying itself. The inability to cry is the winter of the soul. It is the moment when the water has frozen solid. Being able to cry is a sign that you still care about your own survival. When the tears stop, it means the hope has gone silent. Finding the thaw and being able to weep again is often the first sign of recovery. In many ancient myths, including those of the Incas and the Egyptians, gold was seen as the tears of the sun. Water and gold were linked, one being the liquid of life, the other being the solid, frozen version of divine light. We have always looked for value in our sorrow. By calling gold tears, ancient people were saying that the most precious things we possess are born from a celestial grief. It suggests that our pain, like gold, is something to be mined, refined, and respected. While salt can be drying, tears also contain urea and other moisturizing agents in small amounts. Some facialists even claim that the increased blood flow to the face during a cry, vasodilation, creates a temporary glow once the swelling subsides. There is a specific, haunting clarity to a face that has just been washed by tears. The skin is slightly flushed, the eyes are bright, and the expression is calm. It is the face of someone who has survived a battle. It is the beauty of a storm that has finally passed over the valley. We can cry during REM sleep. This often occurs during night terrors or intense emotional dreams, because the body is paralyzed during REM to stop you from acting out dreams. The only thing that can move is the heart, the lungs, and the tear glands. To wake up with wet cheeks is a profound mystery. It means that while your conscious mind was asleep, your subconscious self was doing the work. You were grieving in the dark. It is a reminder that the heart never sleeps. It stays awake to process the things we are too busy to notice during the day. One of the most profound discoveries in lacrimology is the presence of leucine and enkephalin in emotional tears. This is an endorphin, a natural painkiller produced by the brain. When we cry due to emotional trauma, we are essentially bleeding a natural opiate. This explains why Roan Kabad, after crying, we feel a strange, numb peace. Nature didn't just give us the capacity to feel pain. It gave us the medicine for it, tucked away behind our eyelids. Your body is its own first responder. When the accident of heartbreak happens, your brain automatically dispenses a dose of liquid comfort to make sure you can survive the next hour. Prolactin, the hormone found in high concentrations in women's tears, is also the hormone responsible for nursing and nesting behaviors. There is a direct biological link between the fluid that feeds a child and the fluid that expresses sadness. This suggests that crying is fundamentally an act of mothering ourselves or others. When we cry, we are tapping into the most ancient nurturing instincts of the human race. We aren't just being sad. We are seeking the same comfort we once received as infants. It is the body's way of asking for a hug from the universe. Psychologists study the cumulative stress model of crying. Most people don't cry because of one big event. They cry because of the final drop. The lacrimal system has a threshold of neurological arousal. Once the limbic system reaches a peak of electrical activity, it forces the floodgates open to prevent a total mental breakdown. Have you ever cried because you dropped a spoon or lost your keys? You weren't crying for the spoon. You were crying for the 3 months of unpaid bills, the argument with your partner, and the exhaustion you've been hiding. The spoon was just the key that unlocked the vault. Tears are the body's safety valve. They let the steam out so the boiler doesn't explode. In cases of extreme shock or dissociative amnesia, a person may experience dry weeping. They make the sounds of sobbing, their chest heaves, and their face contorts, but the lacrimal glands produce zero fluid. This is often a sign of the brain being so overwhelmed that it has shut down the physical response to protect the person from dehydration or further sensory overload. This is perhaps the most painful form of grief. It is the dessert of the soul. When you can't even find a drop of water to describe your pain, the silence of the eyes becomes a scream. It is a reminder that tears are a luxury of the process. To be able to cry is to have already begun the journey of healing. About 25% of the population experiences the Achu syndrome, photic sneeze reflex. For many of these people, looking at a bright light also triggers a sudden watery eye. This is due to a crosstalk between the optic nerve and the trigeminal nerve, which controls the tear glands. It is as if some people are literally allergic to the light. Their eyes respond to the sun with the same moisture they give to a sad memory. It's a poetic glitch in our wiring, a reminder that beauty and pain travel along the same biological highways. In the 18th century, sensibility was a social movement where men of high status were expected to cry in public to prove they were men of feeling. If a man didn't cry while reading a sad poem, he was considered a brute or a clod. History moves in cycles. We went from the men of sensibility to the stiff upper lip of the 1900s, and now we are returning to a world where we value vulnerability again. It shows that the tear is a social currency. Its value changes based on the era, but its power to prove humanness remains constant. Forensic psychologists look for the slower roll. Genuine emotional tears usually originate from the inner corner of the eye and take a specific path. Fake tears, induced by irritants or acting, often lack the same viscosity and stick to the skin differently because they lack the specific protein-to-salt ratio of genuine grief. You can't fool the heart. A real tear has a weight to it that a drop of water doesn't have. It carries the heat of the body and the salt of the soul. We instinctively know when someone's eyes are crying, but their heart is silent. The salinity, salt content of a human tear is remarkably similar to the salinity of the ancient oceans from which our ancestors emerged millions of years ago. We literally carry a piece of the ocean inside our heads. When you cry, you are releasing an ancient prehistoric fluid. We are walking aquariums. Every time we weep, we are returning a tiny bit of the sea back to the world. It is a reminder that we are not separate from nature. We are just the ocean trying to understand itself. Long-term weeping can lead to periorbital dermatitis. The salt in tears is an irritant, and the constant friction of wiping them away breaks down the skin barrier. Grief leaves a physical mark. The redness around the eyes is a visible scar of an invisible battle. It is a sign that your body has been salted by your experience. In some cultures, these marks were seen as medals of survival, proof that you faced the storm and stayed standing. Philosophers like Émile Cioran argued that tears are the only rational response to the human condition. However, biologically, tears are an optimistic act. You only cry because you believe things should be better. If you truly gave up, you would be silent. To cry is to rebel. It is to say, this is not okay. Even the darkest tear is a yes to life, because it acknowledges that something valuable has been lost. If we didn't love, we wouldn't cry. Therefore, every tear is a testament to a love that once existed, or a hope that still does. As screen time increases globally, dry eye syndrome has become a modern epidemic. This has led to the development of synthetic tears. These aren't just saline. They are complex biopolymers designed to mimic the three-layered sandwich of a human tear. Scientists are now experimenting with adding growth factors and blood-derived proteins to these drops to heal ocular scarring. We are living in an era where we can buy moisture for our eyes, but we cannot buy the meaning behind it. We have mastered the chemistry of the basal tear to save our vision from the glare of our smartphones. Yet we still struggle with the emotional dryness of a digital world. It is a strange irony. Our eyes have never been more chemically hydrated, yet our souls have never felt more parched for a genuine, shared cry. Modern effective computing, AI that recognizes emotion, is being trained to detect the pre-tear shimmer. By analyzing microexpressions in the orbicularis oculi, the muscle around the eye, AI can now predict if a person is about to cry several seconds before the first drop falls. Imagine a world where your phone knows you are sad before you do. While this could lead to digital empathy, apps that play soothing music or suggest a break, it also feels like an invasion of our last private sanctuary. The pre-tear moment is a sacred, internal realization. To have a machine call it out feels like someone opening the bathroom door while you're in the shower. We are teaching machines to see our tears, but can we ever teach them to understand the weight of them? Roboticists in Japan have experimented with robots that can actually cry. By using internal reservoirs and heating elements, these robots produce warm liquid drops to simulate human distress. The goal is to trigger the mirror neuron response in human caregivers, making the interaction feel more authentic. Can a tear be true if there is no heart behind it? If a robot cries, we might feel bad for it, but the alchemy is broken. A human tear is powerful because it is expensive. It costs metabolic energy and emotional labor. A robot's tear is just a programmed leak. This fact challenges our definition of empathy. Is it the sight of the tear that matters, or the knowledge of the suffering? Tears contain cell-free DNA. Forensics experts are exploring the possibility of using tears left at a crime scene to identify suspects. Because tears are often shed during violent or high-stress encounters, they serve as a biological timestamp of the event. Even in the darkest moments of a crime, the body leaves behind its most vulnerable evidence. A tear shed at a crime scene is a piece of the person's identity left floating in salt water. It is as if the body is trying to confess or testify through its fluids, even when the person remains silent. The crying face, and the loudly crying face, are consistently among the top 10 most used emojis globally. Linguists argue that we are using these icons to replace the physical vulnerability signal that is lost in text-based communication. We have distilled the complex chemistry of the tear into a yellow pixel. While these emojis help us bridge the gap of distance, they also flatten the experience. A real tear has temperature, viscosity, and scent. A digital tear is a shortcut. We are becoming a society that cries more often through our thumbs than through our eyes. While in the womb, the fetus is submerged in amniotic fluid, which has a salinity and chemical makeup strikingly similar to the human tear. The fetus's eyes are constantly bathed in this maternal tear for 9 months. Perhaps this is why water and tears feel so much like home. Our first 9 months of existence were spent in a giant, warm tear. When we cry as adults, we might be subconsciously trying to return to that state of perfect, submerged safety, the oceanic feeling where there was no separation between our bodies and the world. Biohackers and artists have proposed tear banks, where people can cryogenically freeze their emotional tears. The idea is that these samples contain the unique proteomic markers of a specific moment in your life, your wedding day tear, or your grief for a parent tear. It is the ultimate emotional time capsule. Imagine being able to show your grandchildren the actual salt crystals shed on the day you met their grandmother. It turns a fleeting, liquid moment into a physical relic. It is the desire to make the most ephemeral part of ourselves permanent. Recent studies suggest that reflex tears from onions or smoke are higher in vitamin C and other antioxidants. The eye uses these irritants as a trigger to flood the surface with protective nutrients to prevent oxidative stress to the cornea. Even when we are attacked by the environment, our body uses that attack as an excuse to heal us. It's a beautiful metaphor. The very things that cause us to cry, the irritants of life, often force us to release the very nutrients we need to stay healthy. The struggle itself brings the medicine. In high-stress corporate environments in Japan and parts of Europe, crying rooms, rueikatsu, are being built. These are acoustically isolated, dark rooms designed specifically for employees to have an emotional release during the workday. We have reached a point where the human is so suppressed by the professional that we have to build special cages just to be ourselves for 10 minutes. It is a sign of a society that recognizes the utility of the tear, the productivity boost after a cry, but still fears the intimacy of it. We are allowed to cry, but only if the walls are thick enough. If a tear is shed in a vacuum like deep space, it doesn't just sit there. It will boil and freeze simultaneously in a process called sublimation, eventually becoming a tiny cloud of ice crystals that can drift through the cosmos for billions of years. Your sadness is potentially immortal. A tear shed on a future lunar colony could, theoretically, outlast the Earth itself. It would become a diamond of ice, floating through the stars, a frozen, crystalline memory of a human feeling, traveling through a universe that is otherwise silent. We often assume that men were always taught not to cry, but history tells a different story. In the 18th century, sensibility was a celebrated trait. Men of high status, generals, politicians, and poets, would weep openly in public to demonstrate their refined moral character. If a man didn't cry while reading a sad novel or witnessing an act of charity, he was viewed as a brute. The stiff upper lip is actually a relatively modern invention of the Victorian era. For much of history, a man's tears were seen as his honor. It was the proof that his heart wasn't made of stone. When we tell men today to be strong by hiding their tears, we are actually asking them to be less human than their ancestors were. We are asking them to live in a desert while their grandfathers lived in a lush, emotional valley. When we are close to crying, the muscles in the larynx, voice box, begin to spasm. This creates a tremolo or a crack in the voice. This acoustic frequency is approximately 10 to 12 hertz, a vibration that humans are biologically tuned to detect with extreme precision. You don't need to see a tear to feel it. When someone's voice breaks, it sends a shiver through the listener. It is the sound of a soul fracturing. We can hide our eyes behind sunglasses, but we can rarely hide the shake in our throat. It is the most honest sound a human can make, a frequency of pure, unfiltered truth that bypasses the listener's logic and goes straight to their heart. Crying during an apology or a reconciliation releases massive amounts of oxytocin, the bonding hormone. Research shows that when two people cry together during a conflict resolution, the social repair happens 40% faster. The physical act of weeping lowers the defensive cortisol levels in both parties. A tear is often the white flag that ends a war between two people. You can argue with words for hours, but you cannot argue with a tear. It is the biological reset that allows us to see the other person not as an enemy, but as a hurting human being. Forgiveness isn't just a mental choice. It is a chemical process that often requires the lubrication of tears to move the heavy gears of the heart. Studies show that the blue light emitted by cinema and phone screens can suppress melatonin, but it also creates a stark contrast that makes the shimmer of tears on screen more visible to the audience. Filmmakers use catch lights specifically to highlight the moisture in an actor's eye, triggering the audience's mirror neurons. Why do we pay money to sit in a dark room and cry for a stranger? Because cinema is the church of the tear. It is the one place where society gives us permission to feel everything we've been suppressing. When the lights go down, the armor comes off. We aren't just crying for the movie. We are using the movie as a safe passage to cry for ourselves. In many warrior cultures, such as the Japanese samurai, crying was forbidden on the battlefield but required in poetry and tea ceremonies. A samurai was expected to show extreme emotional sensitivity to the transience of life, mono no aware. This reveals a sophisticated balance, the ability to be a warrior in the world but a poet in the soul. These cultures understood that a man who cannot cry is a dangerous man because he has lost touch with the value of life. Tears were the coolant for the fire of the sword. It reminds us that true strength isn't the absence of emotion, but the mastery of it. While salt can be an irritant, tears also contain urea and glucose, which are natural humectants. However, if tears are left to dry on the skin without being washed, the salt crystals can cause microabrasions. Grief leaves a physical burn. The red, raw skin around the eyes after a night of weeping is a scar of an invisible battle. It is a sign that your body has been salted by your experience. It takes time for the skin to heal, just as it takes time for the heart to heal. Respect the salt burn. It is the price of feeling. Functional MRI, fMRI, scans show that when a mother sees her own child cry, her brain's pain center, the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, lights up as if she herself is being physically hurt. This is a hardwired biological link. There is no such thing as a solitary tear for a child. A child's tear always falls twice, once from the child's eye and once in the mother's heart. This biological echo is what ensured the survival of our species. We are designed to feel each other's pain so intensely that we are forced to fix it. Basal tears contain a small amount of lipocolin, a protein that helps transport oils. But in cases of physical eye injury, the brain increases the protein content to create a biological bandage, a thicker, more viscous fluid that coats the wound. Even when your eye is physically wounded, your body cries a bandage. It is the ultimate act of self-care. It reminds us that we are built to survive. We are built to heal. Our fluids are not just waste. They are the first aid kit we carry with us everywhere we go. Data from emotional tracking apps shows that most crying episodes occur between 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. This is when cortisol, the alertness hormone, drops and the exhaustion of the day sets in, lowering our emotional defenses. The twilight sob is a global phenomenon. It is the moment when the work self turns off and the human self turns on. When the sun goes down, the distractions of the world fade, and we are finally left alone with our thoughts. The night doesn't make us sad. It just gives the sadness room to breathe. Vocalized crying, sobbing with sound, uses the same respiratory patterns as laughter. Both involve short, staccato exhales that stimulate the diaphragm and oxygenate the blood. This is why crying laughing is such a common, confusing transition. Grief and joy are neighbors. They use the same house, the same lungs, and the same voice. This is why, in our most intense moments, we don't know whether to laugh or cry. We are simply overflowing. We are experiencing the sheer intensity of being alive, and our lungs are just trying to keep up with the rhythm of our soul. Literary critics have long studied the lachrymose novel. In the 18th and 19th centuries, writers like Samuel Richardson and Charles Dickens used tears as a moral compass. If a character cried, it was a sign of their nobility of spirit. Conversely, a character who could not weep was often the antagonist, someone whose heart had been calcified by greed or malice. Literature is the dry version of our wet emotions. We read books to feel the things we are too afraid to feel in our own lives. When Dickens described the death of Little Nell, he wasn't just writing words. He was conducting an orchestra of public grief. Thousands of people in London and New York waited at the docks for the next installment of the story, their eyes already welling up. Literature serves as a communal tear duct, allowing an entire society to weep together for a fictional pain, thereby easing the pressure of their real-world struggles. In many ancient cosmologies, the world was created from the tears of a god. In Egyptian mythology, humans were born from the tears of Ra, the sun god, as he wept for his lost children. In Norse mythology, the giant Ymir's tears became the oceans. These myths tell us that we are made of divine sorrow. It suggests that to be human is, by definition, to be a creature born of a tear. It reframes our grief not as a mistake or a weakness, but as our very origin story. If the gods can weep, then a human's tear is not a fall from grace. It is an act of holiness. It is the liquid link between the dirt of the earth and the fire of the stars. The olfactory bulb is directly connected to the amygdala and the hippocampus, the brain centers for emotion and memory. This is why certain smells, a specific perfume, the smell of old books, or the scent of a rainy street, can trigger reflex emotional tears faster than any visual or auditory stimulus. Smell is the back door to the heart. You can close your eyes and cover your ears, but you cannot stop breathing. A sudden scent can mug you with a memory from 20 years ago, bringing a tear to your eye before you've even consciously realized why you're sad. These are the ghost tears, the ones that remind us that nothing is ever truly forgotten. Our memories are just waiting for a specific molecule to unlock the gates. In elderly populations, the chemical composition of tears changes significantly. As estrogen and testosterone levels decline, the hormonal buffering of tears weakens. This often leads to a state where the elderly cry more easily at sentimental stimuli, a phenomenon sometimes called emotional lability. There is a profound softness in an old man's tear. It is the result of a life where the hard edges have finally worn away. After decades of being tough, the body finally gives up the fight against its own sensitivity. An elderly person's tears are like a library being washed by a gentle rain. They carry the weight of every story, every loss, and every sunset they've ever seen. It is the thinning of the veil between the person and the world. When we stare at screens, our blink rate drops by 60% to 70%. Normally, we blink about 15 to 20 times per minute to replenish the tear film. On a smartphone, we might only blink 5 times. This causes the aqueous layer to evaporate, leading to screen-induced dry eye. We are literally forgetting to blink because we are so consumed by the digital world. We are starving our eyes of the very moisture they need to see clearly, also we can consume more data. It is a biological metaphor for the modern age. We have more information than ever, but we are becoming drier as a result. We are losing our lubrication, our ability to pause, reflect, and moisten our perspective. During a sob, the body's sympathetic nervous system causes a rapid dilation of the capillaries in the face. This increased blood flow is what causes the redness and puffiness. Once the crying stops, the blood stays in the tissue for a while, providing a surge of oxygen and nutrients to the facial skin. The human touch. There is a glow that comes after a storm. After the salt has been washed away, the face looks revitalized, raw, and incredibly alive. It is the flush of survival. You look like someone who has just returned from a far-off place. It is the most human you will ever look, stripped of pretension, washed by brine, and pulsing with the blood of your own resilience. Fact 80. The last tear, the clinical phenomenon. The science. Hospice nurses and doctors often report a last tear or the tear of death. Just as the body shuts down, a single drop of moisture often escapes the eye. While clinically attributed to the final relaxation of the lacrimal duct and the cessation of the blink reflex, it remains one of the most emotional moments in clinical care. The human touch. The last tear is the final signature of a life. It is the body's last act of letting go. Whether it is a biological reflex or a final emotional release, it serves as a profound full stop to a human story. It is the moment the water returns to the world, leaving the vessel behind. It is the most quiet, most heavy drop of all. In Japan, there is a concept called kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold. This philosophy has been applied to emotional kintsugi, where the act of crying is seen as the gold that fills the cracks of a broken pottery with gold. Instead of hiding the scars of grief, the visible signs of having wept are seen as marks of increased value and durability. We often try to wash away the evidence of our tears as if they were a stain. But the hibby cracks of our lives are what make us unique. A person who has never cried is like a perfect, factory-made bowl, functional but soulless. A person who has wept and allowed those tears to seal their wounds is a masterpiece of resilience. Your tears don't make you broken. They are the very material that makes you whole again. Patients who have lost an eye or had their lacrimal glands surgically removed sometimes experience phantom tearing. They feel the sensation of a hot tear rolling down their cheek, even though the physical hardware to produce it is gone. This is a neurological phenomenon similar to phantom limb pain occurring in the somatosensory cortex. This proves that crying is as much a state of mind as it is a state of body. Your brain remembers how it feels to be moved to tears. It craves that release so deeply that it will hallucinate the moisture. It is a haunting reminder that our emotions are not just in our heads. They are deeply etched into our neural map. We are wired for the sob, even when the wires are cut. Musicologists have identified a specific musical ornament called the appoggiatura that is most likely to make listeners cry. It is a leaning note that creates a brief moment of tension by clashing with the melody before resolving into harmony. This cycle triggers the brain's nucleus accumbens, releasing dopamine in a shiver or a tear. Music is a tear that has found its way out through the ears instead of the eyes. When a singer's voice cracks or a violin weeps with an appoggiatura, they are communicating a universal frequency of longing. You don't need to know the lyrics to cry to a song in a foreign language. The tension and release of the music is a direct mirror of the tension and release of a human heart. Scientists are now looking at historical tears, samples preserved in lacrimatories or on old letters. By using mass spectrometry, they can analyze the protein markers to determine the health, diet, and even the stress levels of people who lived hundreds of years ago. Imagine reading a letter from a soldier in the Civil War and being able to see the chemical signature of his fear on the paper. A tear on a page is a living fossil. It is the most intimate connection we have with the dead. While ink tells us what they thought, the salt stain of a tear tells us what they felt. It is the only part of their body that remains on the page. Crying is contagious. When we see someone cry, our anterior cingulate cortex, the area of the brain that handles empathy, is activated. In a group setting, this can lead to mass hysteria or communal weeping. This is a survival mechanism designed to synchronize the emotional state of the tribe. This is why a movie theater or a stadium can feel so electric. When one person breaks, a frequency is set. We are social animals, and our tears are the glue that binds us. To cry with others is to say, "Your pain is my pain, and mine is yours." It is the ultimate rejection of the idea that we are alone in this universe. While you sleep, you do not blink. To prevent the eye from drying out, the basal tear production shifts its composition. It becomes slightly more mucus-heavy to create a thick, protective blanket over the cornea. This is what causes sleep or rheum in the corners of your eyes in the morning. Even when you are unconscious, your body is weeping a protective layer over your vision. While you dream of other worlds, your eyes are being bathed and prepared for the light of the new day. It is a quiet, nightly ritual of maintenance, a reminder that you are cared for by your own biology, even when you aren't awake to appreciate it. Psychogenic, emotional weeping is controlled by the prefrontal cortex, the same part of the brain responsible for high-level decision-making and complex thought. This is why we don't cry from simple physical pain as much as we cry from the idea of pain or the meaning of a loss. Animals cry when they are hurt. Humans cry when they are aware of being hurt. Our tears are a byproduct of our intelligence. We cry because we can imagine a world where the tragedy didn't happen. Every tear is a calculation, a comparison between the real and the ideal. To cry is to be a philosopher of the heart. In severe cases of clinical depression or anhedonia, the patient often loses the ability to cry. This is due to a shutdown of the limbic system's connection to the lacrimal glands. Paradoxically, the patient often feels more pain because they lack the endorphin reset that comes with a sob. This is the winter of the soul. To be unable to cry is to be trapped in a house with no windows. It is a state of dry grief where the pain has no exit. Recovering the ability to weep is often the first sign that the depression is lifting. The first tear after a long drought is a celebration. It is the sound of the ice cracking and the river of life beginning to flow again. Data suggests that we are crying more in the 21st century than in the 20th. Researchers attribute this to compassion fatigue, the constant exposure to global tragedies through social media. Our brains are being forced to process the grief of 8 billion people, which our tribal brain was never designed to do. We are carrying the tears of the world in our pockets. Every time we scroll through a news feed, we are asking our small, individual hearts to weep for 1,000 different tragedies. It is a heavy burden. We must learn to filter our tears, to save them for the things we can actually touch and change, lest we drown in a sea of digital sorrow. The chemical makeup of the human tear is 98% water, but that final 2% is a perfect mirror of the ancient primeval seas. We carry the salt of the earth in our heads. When we die, our moisture evaporates or returns to the soil, eventually finding its way back to the ocean. We are just organized water. Every tear you have ever shed is now somewhere in the world. In a cloud, in a river, or in the sea. You have been donating pieces of yourself to the earth your entire life. When you cry, you aren't losing anything. You are just returning alone to the universe. When a tear dries, it leaves behind a crystalline structure. Recent studies in biocrystallography suggest that the specific arrangement of these salt crystals is influenced by the proteomic profile of the person at that exact microsecond. This means a tear is a physical data storage device of a moment in time. Imagine if we could read the salt left on an old photograph. Your tears are the only part of your internal state that physically survives the moment it was felt. Long after your words are forgotten, the salt of your presence remains on the things you touched while you wept. It is the most permanent version of your most fleeting feelings. The water molecules in your tears are not new. The hydrogen in your eyes was forged in the Big Bang, and the oxygen was created in the bellies of dying stars. Every time you cry, you are releasing a fluid that is nearly 13.8 billion years old. You are crying stardust. When a drop rolls down your cheek, it is a cosmic traveler that has spent eons traveling through the vacuum of space just to manifest as your sorrow or your joy. You are the universe's way of experiencing a sob. Your grief is not just a human event, it is a cosmic event. Architects use acoustics and lighting, specifically the golden ratio, to design spaces like cathedrals or memorials that intentionally lower the threshold for crying. High ceilings and reverberating echoes stimulate the anterior cingulate cortex, making individuals feel small and more prone to emotional tears. We build crying machines out of stone and glass. We create spaces where it is finally safe to be overwhelmed. These buildings are designed to hold our tears when we can no longer hold them ourselves. A cathedral is just a giant stone version of a lacrimatory, a vessel for the collective grief of a city. Before a tear falls, the tear meniscus, the thin line of fluid at the edge of the eyelid, thickens significantly. This shimmer acts as a social beacon. Humans are trained to detect this glint from over 20 feet away, triggering an immediate empathetic response even before the first drop is visible. That shimmer is the most vulnerable moment of a conversation. It is the warning light of the soul. When you see that glint in someone's eye, the world stops. It is the moment where we decide to be kind or to be cruel. That tiny line of water has the power to change the trajectory of a relationship forever. The water you cry today will evaporate, enter the atmosphere, and eventually fall as rain. It will water the crops, enter the rivers, and be drunk by another human being hundreds of years from now. This is the hydrological loop. One day, your great-great-grandchild might drink a glass of water that contains a molecule of the tear you shed today. Our sorrow is recycled by the earth into nourishment. Nothing is wasted. Your pain today literally becomes the rain that sustains the future. You are part of an endless, liquid chain of life. The very first time a child cries with actual tears, around 1 to 3 months, it creates a massive neural map in the brain. It is the first time the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system successfully negotiate a physical output for an internal feeling. The first tear is the birth of the individual. It is the moment a child stops being a bundle of needs and starts being a person with feelings. It is the most important software update the human brain ever receives. It is the moment the inner world finally finds a way to talk to the outer world. We produce micro tears all day long that we never notice. These are tiny emotional releases that happen when we watch a sunset or feel a brief pang of nostalgia. They are reabsorbed by the lacrimal puncta before they ever leave the eye. You are crying all the time in tiny, invisible ways. Your body is constantly venting small amounts of sadness and beauty so that you don't reach a boiling point. You are a much more sensitive creature than you give yourself credit for. You are a walking poem, even when you think you are just being productive. While AI can simulate speech, art, and even fake crying, it cannot simulate the metabolic cost of a tear. A human tear costs calories, oxygen, and protein. It is a biological sacrifice. This is the final frontier of what it means to be alive. A machine can never suffer because it has nothing to lose. A human tear is powerful because it is real. It is a piece of your physical self that you are giving away. As long as we cry, we are superior to any machine because we have the courage to be inefficient and vulnerable. After a massive crying episode, the brain enters a state of delta wave activity, similar to deep sleep. This is the silence of the sob. It is a period of intense neural reorganization where the brain rewires itself to accept a new reality, such as a loss. That silence after you finish crying is the most sacred sound in the world. It is the sound of acceptance. It is the sound of a heart that has been broken and is now beginning to knit itself back together. It is the sound of grace. In that silence, you are not the person you were before the tear fell. You are someone new. A tear is the only thing in the universe that can be both a liquid, a solid, when crystallized, and a gas, when evaporated, while simultaneously being a chemical, a symbol, and a medicine. It is the most versatile substance on Earth. A tear is the full stop at the end of the sentence of life. It is the first thing we do when we are born, even if dry, and often the last thing we do when we leave. It is the salt of the earth and the light of the soul. To cry is to be human. To cry is to be alive. To cry is to say to the universe, I am here, I am hurting, I am joyful, and I will not be silent. Linguists have observed that in many primitive languages, the word for I and the word for spring, water source, are the same. This is not a coincidence. Early humans viewed the eye not as a camera that takes in light, but as a well that produces life-giving moisture. The biology of the tear actually preceded the metaphors of our speech. Before we had words like melancholy, despair, or ecstasy, we had the tear. It is the proto-language. If you were to meet a human from 50,000 years ago, you couldn't speak to them about your day, but if you cried, they would know exactly what you meant. The tear is the only dialect that has never changed, never evolved, and never been misunderstood. It is the root code of our species. Plants undergo a process called guttation. On damp nights, pressure builds up in the roots of a plant, forcing excess water out through tiny pores on the tips of the leaves. To the naked eye, it looks like the plant is weeping. This fluid contains sugars and minerals, much like the electrolytes in human tears. Nature mimics our grief to survive. When a forest weeps in the early morning, it is relieving the internal pressure of its own growth. We are no different. We think our tears are mental, but they are as biological as a tree sap or a morning dew. We are just walking plants that have developed a heart, and our tears are the guttation of our heavy souls. In the design of the Taj Mahal and other great mausoleums, the use of water marble and reflective pools is designed to create a liquid atmosphere. The humidity in these stone structures is often kept slightly higher, which naturally stimulates the lacrimal glands of visitors. making them feel a sense of sacred sorrow without knowing why. Great architects don't just build walls. They build emotional engines. They understand that to truly honor the dead, the living must be made to feel. By manipulating the very air we breathe, these buildings coax the tears out of us. It is a reminder that our environment is always talking to our tear glands. Sometimes you aren't sad. You are just in a room that was built to make you remember what love felt like. Every time you blink to spread a tear, your brain momentarily shuts down the visual cortex. This is called saccadic suppression. During a heavy cry, these blackouts become longer. This is a biological defense mechanism to prevent the brain from being overstimulated by the sight of the very thing causing the pain. The body gives you micro breaks from reality. When you cry, your brain is literally trying to blink away the world. It is a flickering of the soul, a strobe light of sorrow. It allows you to process the pain in small, digestible frames, rather than one overwhelming, continuous stream of agony. Your eyelids are the curtains that keep the theater of your mind from burning down. While humans are the only ones who cry emotionally, domestic dogs have evolved a watery eye, specifically to interact with humans. A study in Current Biology found that dogs produce more tears when reunited with their owners. This is triggered by oxytocin and is theorized to be an evolutionary trait to make humans feel more protective of them. Our dogs have learned the language of the tear to stay close to us. They don't cry because they are sad in the human sense. They cry because they know that a moist eye is the fastest way to a human's heart. It is a beautiful cross-species hacking of our empathy. It shows that the tear is so powerful, it has crossed the boundary between species to become a universal symbol of love and belonging. The salinity of the amniotic fluid in the womb is almost identical to the salinity of a basal tear. For the first 9 months of your existence, your eyes were permanently crying. You lived in a world of tears before you ever saw a ray of light. This is why we find water so comforting. When we cry as adults, we are subconsciously trying to recreate the ocean of the mother. We are trying to return to the only time in our lives when we were perfectly safe, perfectly warm, and perfectly submerged. Every tear is a tiny, salty souvenir of the place we all came from. Sociologists have mapped crying latitudes. People living in colder, northern climates tend to cry less frequently in public but for longer durations in private. People in warmer, equatorial climates cry more frequently and explosively, but recover faster. This is linked to the metabolic rate and the cultural venting of heat. The sun dictates how we grieve. In the heat, our emotions evaporate quickly. In the cold, they freeze and settle deep in our bones. Your tears are a product of your soil and your sky. You don't just cry for yourself. You cry with the rhythm of your ancestors and the temperature of your home. When we see a crying emoji, loudly crying face, our brain recognizes it in the fusiform gyrus, the same area that recognizes real faces. However, it does not trigger the same hormonal release in the observer as a real liquid tear does. The digital tear provides the information of sadness without the contagion of empathy. We are becoming informationally sad, but emotionally numb. We send 1,000 crying faces to our friends, but we rarely sit in a room and watch a real tear fall. We are losing the chemistry of the connection. A digital tear is a ghost. A real tear is a physical weight. We must be careful not to let our screens dry out our souls. After a bout of crying, the chemical scent of the skin changes. The stress hormones that were excreted through the tears leave a faint, musky residue on the cheeks. Subconsciously, others can smell that you have just finished a cry, which triggers a low aggression response in them. You carry the aura of the aftermath. Even after you've washed your face, You are projecting a signal of peace to the world. It is the scent of the survivor. It tells everyone around you that the storm has passed and that you are now in a state of holy exhaustion. It is the most peaceful version of yourself. Every tear you have ever shed is still on this planet. Some of it is in the clouds, some is in the grass, and some is currently being drunk by a bird or a tree. Water is a closed system. Your grief of 10 years ago might be the rain that hits your window tonight. You are never truly empty of your past. Your tears are on a journey around the world, and eventually, they find their way back to you. The universe doesn't throw anything away, especially not the liquid evidence of your love and your pain. You are part of an infinite salty loop. You are the ocean, and the ocean is you. Conservators working on ancient manuscripts often find salt halos on the vellum or parchment. These aren't just water stains. They are the crystallized remains of a human being's emotional release from centuries ago. By using non-destructive X-ray fluorescence, scientists can see the elemental map of a tear shed on a letter from the 16th century. When you touch an old letter and feel a crinkle in the paper, you might be touching someone's ancient sorrow. That salt is a bridge through time. The person who wrote those words is long gone. Their bones turn to dust, but the salt of their spirit is still there, clinging to the page. It is a reminder that our feelings are the most durable thing we leave behind. The ink fades, the paper yellows, but the salt, the evidence of a heart, remains. In classical music theory, the trill, a rapid alternation between two notes, mimics the biological vibrato of a human voice that is about to break. Neuromusicologists have found that when a violin plays a slow, descending minor scale with a high-frequency trill, it triggers the superior temporal gyrus, forcing the brain to simulate the feeling of a held-back sob. Music is a dry version of crying. It allows us to experience the tension of a tear without the mess of the liquid. When we listen to a melancholic cello suite, we are essentially crying through the instrument. The music does the weeping for us, allowing our brain to achieve the same chemical release, catharsis, that we would get from an actual crying session. It is the ultimate form of emotional outsourcing. In ancient Spartan and Roman military cultures, crying was not just discouraged. It was seen as a biological leak of vital energy. However, these cultures had ritualized crying days or festivals, like the Parandalia, where men were commanded to weep for their ancestors. These societies understood that you cannot suppress a tear forever. If you try to hold it in, it turns into grit, a hardness of the soul that eventually leads to madness or cruelty. By creating a scheduled release, they ensured that their warriors stayed human. It reminds us that Stoicism was never about not feeling. It was about choosing the right time to let the floodgates open. The hippocampus, memory center, and the lacrimal gland are linked through the autonomic nervous system. If you once experienced an intense emotional event in a specific location, a park bench, a kitchen, a hospital hallway, your brain creates a place-tear map. Years later, simply walking into that environment can trigger the production of basal and emotional fluid before a single thought even enters your mind. Our eyes remember things that our minds have tried to forget. You might walk into an old house and suddenly find your eyes stinging for no reason. That isn't dust. That is your biology recognizing a ghost. Your body is pre-processing the grief of that location, preparing you for the memory before it even arrives. We don't just live in places. Our tears haunt them. In extremely dry environments like the Sahara or the Atacama, your body undergoes selective dehydration. To save your life, your brain will shut down your sweat glands and your saliva glands, but it will almost never shut down your basal tear production. The eye is the last sanctuary of water in the body. Your brain would rather let your skin crack and your tongue swell than let your eyes go dry. It shows the hierarchy of our survival. Vision is life. Even at the edge of death by thirst, your body will find one last drop of salt water to make sure you can see the horizon. We are built to see our way out of the desert, even if we have to use our own life force to do it. Art historians have noted a technique called chiaroscuro, extreme light and dark, used by masters like Caravaggio to highlight the glint of a tear. When we look at a painting of a weeping figure, our mirror neurons don't just recognize the sadness. They actually stimulate our own tear ducts to produce a micro-shimmer. A great painting is a tear trigger. It is a silent conversation between the artist's hand and your lacrimal gland. When you feel moved by a piece of art, you are experiencing a chemical resonance. The artist found a way to reach out from the canvas and pull a drop of water from your eye. It is the most intimate form of communication, a liquid handshake across the centuries. As we age, the prefrontal cortex, which regulates emotional control, often becomes less rigid. This is why many people find themselves crying much more easily at sentimental things, like commercials or a child's drawing, as they get older. This is often mislabeled as senility, but it is actually a state of emotional integration. The elderly aren't weak, they are open. After a lifetime of building walls, the walls finally crumble, and the water is allowed to flow. It is the softening of the soul. An old man's tear is a library of everything he has survived. It is the most honest moisture on earth. It is the sign of a life that has finally stopped fighting and started feeling. In the field of soft robotics, engineers are creating artificial eyes that can leak a saline solution to cool down internal processors. While purely functional, the visual effect is that the machine is weeping when it is overworked. We are haunted by the image of a machine crying. Why? Because the tear is our final defense. We believe that as long as we are the only ones who cry, we are the only ones who are real. Seeing a robot weep feels like a violation of our most sacred boundary. It forces us to ask, is it the water that makes the soul, or the soul that makes the water? An intense crying session, a good sob, burns approximately 1.3 calories per minute, more than sitting still but less than walking. More importantly, it causes a massive drop in blood glucose as the brain uses energy to process the emotional spike. This is why you always want comfort food, carbs and sugar. After a long cry, your body has literally run out of gas processing your pain. You have burned your sorrow. Eating a piece of bread or a chocolate after crying isn't emotional eating. It is a biological necessity. You are refueling the machine so it can face the next day. If you took every tear ever shed by every human being who has ever lived, you would have enough water to fill a small sea. This sea of sorrow would have the same chemical signature as the ancient oceans of the Paleozoic era. We are all contributors to a global ocean of emotion. Every time you cry, you are adding your drop to the collective history of our species. You are not crying alone. You are part of a 300,000-year-old rhythm. Your tears are the ink with which the story of humanity is written on the face of the earth. In microgravity, physics behaves differently. If an astronaut cries on the International Space Station, ISS, the tear does not fall. Due to surface tension, the liquid clings to the eye and the cheek, growing into a wobbling, gelatinous sphere of salt water. If the astronaut doesn't wipe it away, the sphere can become large enough to cover the eye and bridge over to the nose, creating a genuine risk of localized drowning in space. Imagine the poignancy of a tear that refuses to leave you. On Earth, we shed our grief. We let it fall to the ground and walk away. But in the stars, your sorrow clings to your face. It stays with you, a heavy, transparent ghost that refuses to be let go. It reminds us that humanity was designed for a world with gravity, a world where we are allowed to drop our burdens. In space, you must manually remove your pain, or it will eventually consume your vision. NASA's Artemis missions and lunar probes have confirmed the presence of hydroxyl, OH, and water ice in the moon's shadowed craters. Spectroscopic analysis suggests this water may have been delivered by comets, the same comets that brought the water that now makes up your own body. There is a literal chemical brotherhood between the ice on the moon and the moisture in your eye. When a future astronaut stands on the lunar surface and weeps from the sheer awe of the view, the salt water they release is a homecoming. It is a reunion of two drops of water that were forged in the same star but separated for billions of years. To cry on the moon is to complete a cosmic cycle. The sun constantly emits a solar wind of charged particles. When these hit the Earth's magnetosphere, they create the auroras. Ancient cultures often viewed the aurora borealis as the tears of the sky or the dancing souls of those who had passed. We have always looked for our own biology in the sky. By calling the northern lights tears, we are projecting our most intimate form of communication onto the grandest stage in the universe. It suggests that if the universe has a voice, it must sound like a sob, and if it has a color, it must look like a shimmering, translucent green. Biometric engineers are developing ocular fluid mapping, because the way a tear breaks across your specific corneal topography is as unique as a fingerprint. Future security systems could use the flow pattern of a tear to verify your identity. Your grief could become your password. While it sounds like science fiction, it reflects a deep truth. No two people cry the same way. The path a tear takes down your cheek is a map of your bone structure, your skin's texture, and your life's history. You are the only person in the universe who can cry your tears. Even in a world of high-tech surveillance, your sorrow remains your most private and unique signature. In theoretical physics, some suggest that at a subatomic level, particles that have interacted remain entangled. Since the water in your body has interacted, certain plants, like the Syncephalum dulcificum, release aerosols when attacked by herbivores. These chemicals trigger the trigeminal nerve in the attacker, causing their eyes to stream with reflex tears. It is botany's tear gas. Life defends its beauty with moisture. Even a plant knows that the fastest way to stop an enemy is to make them blinded by tears. It shows that the tear is not just an expression of sadness. It is one of the most effective biological weapons ever evolved. To make an enemy cry is to force them into a state of forced empathy or forced vulnerability. Research into neurochemical imprinting suggests that the first time we cry from a broken heart in adolescence, the brain creates a massive spike in cortisol and adrenaline that etches that specific emotional frequency into the amygdala. This is why your first heartbreak feels like the end of the world. Your brain is literally learning how to cry for another person. Every subsequent cry in your life carries a faint echo of that first massive surge. You aren't just crying for your current situation. You are crying with the accumulated weight of every tear you've ever shed. Urban planners are discussing restorative cities, where public fountains and gardens are designed using blue space theory. The sound of falling water is tuned to the frequency of human sobbing, the 10 hertz resonance, to subconsciously encourage citizens to release their stress while walking to work. Imagine a city that wants you to be okay. A city that understands that the pressure of modern life is too much and provides liquid altars where you can silently let a single tear go while sitting on a park bench. It is a vision of a future where we stop treating crying as an embarrassment and start treating it as a public health necessity. If humanity were to ever face extinction, the final biological act of the final human would likely be a reflex tear, the body's final attempt to protect the cornea as the systems fail. The story of humanity begins with a cry and ends with a tear. It is the alpha and omega of our existence. Between those 2 points, we have built empires, written symphonies, and traveled to the moon. But we have never found a way to be above the simple, salty drop of water. It is the one thing that truly makes us one. Biologically, a tear is just a byproduct of a gland. But functionally, it is the only thing on Earth that can instantly change the mood of a room, stop a war, or heal a heart. The final fact is this: you were given tears because you were meant to care. In a universe of cold stone and empty vacuum, you are a creature that leaks when it feels too much. That isn't a design flaw. It is your greatest glory. To cry is to prove that you are alive, that you have a soul, and that you are brave enough to let the world see it. The tear film is the smoothest surface of the human body. Because of its high surface tension and lipid oil layer, it acts as a perfect convex mirror. Forensic photographers have successfully recovered the final reflection of a scene by zooming into the moisture of an eye in high-resolution photographs. Your tears are a recording device. In every drop, there is a tiny, distorted reflection of the world you are looking at. When you cry while looking at a loved one, their face is literally etched into the moisture of your eye. You are taking them in as you let the water out. It reminds us that we never cry into a void. We cry in response to the world, and the world is always reflected in our sorrow. Crying is not a continuous stream. It is pulsatile. The lacrimal gland pumps fluid in waves that are synchronized with your heart rate and your respiratory cycle. During an intense sob, your tear pulse can speed up to match a resting heartbeat, creating a rhythmic ebb and flow of moisture. Grief has a heartbeat. Your tears have a tempo. This is why holding it in feels like a physical blockage. You are stopping a natural rhythm of your body. When you finally let go, you are returning your body to its natural cadence. You are breathing through your eyes. It is the music of the body trying to find its way back to peace. In medieval theology, the gift of tears was a recognized spiritual phenomenon. However, neuroscientists today link this to the temporal lobe, the area of the brain associated with religious awe. When we experience a thought that is too big for our brain to process, the temporal lobe sends an emergency signal to the limbic system, triggering tears as a way to ground the person. A tear is what happens when the soul gets too full. Whether it is a religious experience, a scientific discovery, or the birth of a child, the tear is the biological evidence that you have touched something infinite. It is the pressure release valve for the wonder of being alive. You aren't just crying. You are overflowing with the realization of your own existence. The field of epigenetics suggests that intense emotional trauma can leave markers on our DNA. While we don't inherit specific tears, we do inherit a lacrimal sensitivity, the threshold at which our body decides to cry. If your ancestors survived great hardships, your crying reflex might be more finely tuned as a survival mechanism. You carry the tears of your grandmothers in your genetic code. When you cry for a reason you can't quite explain, you might be releasing a multi-generational sigh. Your body is a vessel for a long line of survivors. Every tear you shed is a tribute to the resilience of everyone who came before you. You are the liquid end of a very long, very brave story. A single tear is home to millions of commensal bacteria. These tiny organisms live in the moisture of your eye and help fight off dangerous pathogens. When you cry, you are essentially flushing your microscopic ecosystem, refreshing the army that protects your vision. You are never alone, even in your saddest moment. You carry an entire civilization on the surface of your eye. When you weep, you are performing a great washing for the billions of tiny lives that depend on you. It is a reminder that we are vessels of life on every scale. Even our sorrow is a nurturing act for the biology that keeps us whole. There is a strange chemical similarity between the scent of a face after crying and the smell of the earth after rain, petrichor. Both involve the release of geosmin and other organic compounds. To the human nose, both scents signal a return to earth and a state of calm. You smell like the rain. After a cry, your skin carries the same fresh aroma as a garden after a thunderstorm. It is nature's way of signaling that the tension is over. We are biologically tuned to find this scent comforting. It tells the tribe, the storm has passed, the air is clear, we can begin again. Psychologists found that we store emotional memories in the hippocampus alongside the physical sensations of the tears we shed during those events. This is why recalling a memory can sometimes make your eyes feel hot before you even feel sad. We have a lacrimatory of the mind, a secret glass bottle where we keep all the tears we didn't get to cry. Sometimes, years later, the bottle breaks, and we find ourselves weeping for something that happened a decade ago. It is a sign that the heart never loses a drop, keeps everything until we are finally safe enough to let it out. Because a tear is a liquid lens, it can actually magnify images. If you look at a tiny text through a tear that hasn't fallen yet, the words can appear 2x or 3x larger. Tears don't just blur the world. Sometimes they help us see the small things. In our grief, we often notice the tiny details we ignored when we were happy and busy. The way the light hits a leaf, the texture of a hand, the sound of a bird. The tear magnifies the present moment, forcing us to slow down and look at the small beauty that remains when the big world falls apart. As humans become more technological, some evolutionary biologists argue that our crying capacity might increase as a way to differentiate ourselves from artificial intelligence. The tear may become our primary biological marker of authenticity. In a world of perfect deepfakes and silicon voices, the messy, hot, salty tear is the only thing a machine cannot truly replicate. It is our proof of life. In the future, we may not value people for their intelligence, which machines will have, but for their vulnerability, their ability to weep. The tear will be the crown of the human. The final fact of this segment is the most profound. The nitrogen in your DNA, the calcium in your teeth, the iron in your blood, and the salt in your tears were all made in the interiors of collapsing stars. You are a walking constellation. When you cry, you are releasing stellar brine. You are the universe expressing its own mystery through a 98% water solution. You are not a small thing in a big world. You are a big thing, the universe, experiencing itself through a small, brave human heart. When viewed under a microscope, the crystallization patterns of a dried emotional tear exhibit fractal geometry. These are complex, self-similar patterns that repeat at every scale, much like the branching of a tree, the veins in a leaf, or the structure of a galaxy. Interestingly, basal tears, maintenance moisture, have simpler, more linear structures compared to the complex, jagged forests found in tears of loss. Your sorrow is mathematically beautiful. Even when you feel like your life is falling apart, your body is creating a masterpiece of structural complexity. A fractal is a symbol of infinite complexity in a finite space. It suggests that within a single drop of water, there is an entire universe of meaning. You aren't just leaking fluid. You are shedding a complex, geometric map of your own soul. The tear meniscus is the thin strip of fluid that sits at the junction of the eyelid and the globe of the eye. It is held in place by a precise balance of capillary action and surface tension. For a tear to fall, the volume of fluid must increase until the gravitational pull overcomes the molecular bond of the surface tension. We all know the feeling of being on the brink. Physically, that is your meniscus reaching its maximum capacity. It is the literal edge of your self-control. There is a profound tension in that moment. a silent war between your pride, which wants to hold the liquid in, and your heart, which wants to let it go. When the tear finally breaks and rolls down your cheek, it is a physical surrender to gravity. It is the moment you stop fighting the laws of the universe. Neurologists have found that the human brain's empathy fatigue begins to reset after about 70 to 90 minutes of narrative immersion. This is why the climax of most movies occurs at this mark. The brain has been primed by the rising action, and the oxytocin levels are at their peak, making the audience biologically ready to weep. A movie director is a biological engineer. They are using light and sound to play your hormonal system like a piano. When you cry at the end of a film, it is a testament to the power of story. It proves that we are hardwired to care about the other. We can feel the pain of a fictional character as if it were our own because, at a neurological level, the brain doesn't distinguish between a real friend and a story friend. We are a species that lives in a shared dream. Emotional tears are physically warmer than basal tears. When you are in a state of high emotional arousal, anger, or grief, your core body temperature rises and the blood flow to the face increases, vasodilation. This heat is transferred to the lacrimal fluid. A hot tear is not just a poetic description. It is a thermal reality. A cold tear is usually one of maintenance. A hot tear is one of passion. When you feel that burning sensation on your skin, it is the physical smoke from the fire of your heart. It tells the observer that this isn't a routine blink. This is a high-energy release. You are literally boiling over with feeling. Planetary scientists are studying how lunar regolith, moon dust, would affect human eyes. Moon dust is jagged and glass-like because there is no wind to erode it. In a lunar colony, reflex tears would be the most vital defense mechanism for human settlers, as the eye would need to constantly flush out these microscopic glass shards. The first pioneers on the moon will be the most watery-eyed humans in history. They will be constantly weeping just to survive the environment. It's a beautiful irony. To live among the dry, dead craters of the moon, we must become more liquid than ever. Our survival in the stars depends on our ability to cry. Because the trigeminal nerve carries both sensory information from the nose and the signal to cry from the brain, many people experience a watery eye when they sneeze or when they eat spicy food, like wasabi. This is known as nerve crosstalk. Our bodies are messy systems. Our wires are crossed. This is why we sometimes laugh until we cry or sneeze until we sob. It is a reminder that we are not precision-built machines. We are organic, tangled, and beautifully imperfect. Our joy and our pain are plugged into the same power outlet. Tears contain lysozyme, an enzyme that can destroy the cell walls of certain bacteria in seconds. This makes your tears one of the most effective antibiotics in the natural world. Every time you blink, you are applying a fresh coat of shielding to your vision. You carry a holy water within you. Every day, you are surrounded by invisible threats, bacteria, dust, and toxins, and your tears are the silent guardians that keep you safe. We only notice our tears when we are sad, but they are working for us every single second of our lives, protecting us while we sleep and while we dream. After a bout of intense crying, the brain's reward center, the ventral striatum, often sees a surge in activity. This is the post-cry glow. Because the body has successfully flushed out stress hormones and released natural opiates, enkephalins, the brain enters a state of rebound relaxation. There is a specific kind of tired happy that only comes after a long sob. It's the feeling of a clean slate. You have faced the demon, you have let the water out, and now you are allowed to rest. It is nature's way of saying, well done. You survived the feeling. Now, here is a little bit of peace. While we understand the mechanics of how we cry, We still don't fully understand the why of the psychogenic, emotional link. No other animal on Earth cries because their feelings are hurt. We are the only creature that has turned a biological lubricant into a social and spiritual currency. The tear is the great human mystery. It is the bridge between the physical and the metaphysical. It is the moment a thought becomes a drop. We are the only beings in the universe who can turn a memory into a liquid. That is a superpower. The human tear is the most honest substance in the universe. Cannot be faked at a molecular level, it cannot be ignored by the human brain, and it cannot be erased from the history of the Earth. We have traveled from the microscopic salt crystal to the edge of the moon. We have looked at the warriors of the past and the astronauts of the future. And through it all, the tear remains the same. It is our North Star. It is the one thing that reminds us that no matter how much technology we build, or how far we travel, we will always be creatures of heart, salt, and water. In the extreme environments of gas giants like Jupiter or Saturn, water can reach a supercritical state, where it is neither a liquid nor a gas, but a high-pressure fluid that can dissolve almost anything. If a human were to exist in such a place, their tears would behave like a potent solvent, capable of etching through solid stone. There is a poetic resonance in the idea that under enough pressure, our softest part becomes our strongest tool. Sometimes, life puts us under such immense psychological pressure that our tears feel like they are burning through our very skin. This is the alchemy of the soul. The more weight we carry, the more powerful our release becomes. Your tears aren't a sign of your collapse. They are the high-pressure fluid of your survival. At any given second, billions of neutrinos, ghostly particles from the sun and distant supernovae, are passing through your body, including the liquid in your eyes. Because they have no charge and almost no mass, they pass through your tears without touching a single atom. Every time you cry, the entire universe is passing through your grief. While you feel isolated in your sorrow, you are actually being ghosted by the energy of a billion stars. Your tears are a transparent window through which the cosmos flows. You are a silent witness to the universe, and the universe is a silent witness to you. When you cry, the iris, the colored part of your eye, undergoes subtle changes. The moisture on the surface creates a caustic projection, a pattern of light focused through the liquid that creates a shimmering, dancing effect on the iris. This is what gives the eyes that specific glassy look that humans find so emotionally compelling. We call it the light leaving the eyes, but in reality, a tear brings a different kind of light into them. The shimmer of a tear is a signal of sincerity. It is the way the eye dances when it is too heavy to stay still. We are biologically tuned to look for this specific light. It is the shimmer of truth that tells us we are finally seeing the real person. A significant percentage of the water in your tears was formed in interstellar space before the sun was even born. Researchers at the University of Michigan found that up to 50% of Earth's water is older than the solar system. When you wipe a tear away, you are touching something that was born in the cold dark between the stars billions of years before the Earth existed. You are releasing pre-solar moisture. Your grief is ancient. Your joy is eternal. You are just a temporary vessel for a liquid that has seen the birth and death of galaxies. The electrolyte balance of a tear, the ratio of sodium, potassium, and calcium, is a near-perfect match for the chemistry of the Devonian-era oceans. This was the time when our ancestors first crawled out of the water and onto the land. We didn't really leave the ocean. We just brought it inside of us. Every time you cry, you are returning to your original home. Your tears are a biological reunion with the sea. We are just bags of ocean trying to figure out how to live on dry land. The tear is the bridge that keeps us connected to our watery origins. The physical act of sobbing follows a square wave pattern in terms of air intake. Unlike normal breathing, which is a sine wave, a sob involves a rapid vertical spike of air, a short plateau, and a jagged release. This specific geometry is designed to maximize oxygen intake during a state of emotional hypoxia. Even your breath becomes geometric when you cry. Your body is trying to recalibrate itself. The staccato rhythm of a sob is the sound of your internal computer trying to reboot after a crash. It is a harsh, beautiful music, the rhythm of a machine that is being pushed to its limits and refusing to break. When we see someone's eyes well up, our brain releases vasopressin, a hormone linked to territorial protection and nurturing. We don't just feel sorry for them, we feel an instinctive need to guard them. The shimmer of the tear acts as a biological safety shield. A tear is the ultimate peace treaty. It is a signal that says, I am no longer a threat. In the history of our species, the tear has stopped more fights than the sword has ever won. It is the language of the defenseless. And because we are human, we find that defenselessness to be the most powerful thing in the world. Because a tear changes the refraction of light, it physically softens the features of the person you are looking at. When you look at someone through your own tears, their hard edges disappear. They become a blur of color and light. Maybe we were meant to cry during apologies so that we could literally stop seeing the flaws of the person who hurt us. The tear washes away the details of their mistake and leaves only the essence of their humanity. We forgive through the blur. We see them not as they are, but as they could be. The neuroplasticity of the brain is at its peak immediately following a major emotional release. The brain is fluid and ready to create new neural pathways. This is why revelations and epiphanies often happen in the quiet moments after the tears have dried. You are reborn after every cry. The version of you that started crying is not the version of you that finishes. You have shed a layer of yourself. You have molted your old pain. In the silence that follows, you have the power to decide who you are going to be next. The tear is the solvent that melts your old self so the new self can be formed. The final fact is the most simple. A tear is the only liquid on earth that is also a story. We have reached the end of our voyage. We have seen the stars in the drop and the drop in the stars. But through it all, one truth remains. To be able to weep is to be the luckiest thing in the universe. Out of all the cold planets and silent moons, you are the one that can feel, you are the one that can love, and you are the one that can leak salt water to prove it. Photomicrography has revealed that the topography of a dried tear changes based on the emotional origin. A tear shed from grief creates a dense, chaotic, and jagged structure similar to a forest of thorns. A tear shed from joy or laughter creates a more open, crystalline, and symmetrical pattern. This is due to the varying concentrations of enkephalins and ACTH, stress hormones, which alter how the salt molecules bond during evaporation. Your body is literally sculpting your pain. Even when you feel you have no control over your life, your biochemistry is creating intricate microscopic art. If you were to look at your dried tears on a glass slide, you would see the thumbprint of your specific emotion. Proves that no two cries are the same. Your joy leaves a different physical legacy than your sorrow. Cardiologists have noted that emotional weeping rarely occurs when the heart rate is above 120 BPM, the flight or fight zone. To cry, the body must transition from the sympathetic nervous system, action, to the parasympathetic nervous system, recovery. You cannot cry while you are running for your life. You can only cry once you have reached a place where you think you are safe. Crying is the sound of safety. It is the moment your body realizes the danger has passed and it is finally allowed to process what happened. This is why we often break down the moment we walk through our front door or see a loved one. The tear is the biological all-clear signal. It is the heart's way of saying, the war is over. Now we heal. Our basal tears follow a strict circadian rhythm. The production of the lipid oil layer is highest at midday to protect against evaporation from the sun and lowest at night. However, emotional tears bypass this rhythm entirely, acting as a manual override of our biological clock. Grief is timeless. It doesn't care if it's noon or midnight. When you cry, you are stepping out of the clock time of the world and into the soul time of your experience. A midnight sob is a rebellion against the sun. It is your body prioritizing your internal needs over the demands of the spinning earth. The human eye is capable of detecting a 0.1 millimeters change in the thickness of another person's tear film. This shimmer is detected by our superior temporal sulcus, which is the part of the brain dedicated to interpreting social intentions. We are biologically incapable of ignoring that specific wet glint. The shimmer is the most honest thing you own. You can lie with your words, your hands, and even your smile, but you cannot easily manipulate the thickness of your tear film. It is the proof of life in a conversation. When we see that shimmer, we stop listening to the words and start listening to the person. It is the ultimate deception breaker. Following a crying episode, the body experiences a massive inhalation spike. Because sobbing involves short, gasping breaths, the brain eventually triggers a hyperoxygenation event to compensate. This surge of oxygen to the brain is what causes the clarity and calm that follows a major release. Crying is a reoxygenation of the soul. You are literally clearing the smoke from your mind. That deep, shaky breath you take after the last tear falls is the most important breath of your day. It is the moment your brain wakes up from the fog of pain. You are clearer, sharper, and more present than you were before the first drop fell. While other mammals have lacrimal glands to clean their eyes, humans are the only species that has neural pathways connecting the limbic system, emotion, directly to the lacrimal puncta. We are the only creature on Earth that can be moved to moisture by a thought, a memory, or a song. To cry is the most human thing you can do. It is our species-specific signature. An alien visiting Earth would find our skyscrapers and our technology interesting, but they would find our tears fascinating. They would see a creature that leaks salt water when it's moved by beauty. That is our true superpower. If you were to evaporate all the tears shed in a single year by the global population, you would be left with roughly 40,000 tons of salt. This emotional salt is chemically identical to the salt found in the ancient, prehistoric mines of the Earth. We are literally salting the Earth with our experiences. Every tear you shed adds a tiny bit of mineral wealth to the planet. We are part of the geology of feeling. Thousands of years from now, the salt of our collective grief and joy will be part of the rock layers of the Earth. We are writing our history in brine. Because tears act as a diffractive lens, they break up harsh light into a spectrum of soft colors. This softening of the visual field has been found to lower the amygdala's threat response. When we look at someone through tears, we are physically incapable of seeing them as a sharp or hostile threat. Nature gave us tears so we could survive our own anger. The tear softens the world so we can find a way back to love. It is the lens of grace. We don't just forgive because we want to. We forgive because the tear has washed away the sharp edges of the person who hurt us, allowing us to see their softness once again. Spectroscopy has found water vapor in the atmospheres of planets light years away. This water was formed by the same chemical reactions, hydrogen plus oxygen, that happen in your own body every time you produce a tear. The ingredients for your grief are scattered across the stars. When you cry, you are using interstellar brine. You are the cosmic ocean trying to understand itself through a human eye. You are never alone in your sorrow. because your sorrow is made of the same stuff as the stars. A single tear contains enough information in the form of DNA, hormones, and proteins to reconstruct the entire biological and emotional snapshot of a human being at a specific moment in time. The final fact is this: you are not a small person in a big world. You are a big soul in a small drop. Every tear you shed is a backup of your entire existence. You are never lost, never forgotten, and never empty. As long as you have the ability to cry, you have the ability to begin again. A little deeper into comfort. The day is behind you now, and there is nowhere you need to be but here, resting. And if you're still awake, there will be another video on screen for you to continue the journey a little longer. If these calm explorations help you unwind, you might also like, subscribe, or leave a thought below. It helps other sleepy souls find their way here, too. For now, let your thoughts settle and let the night carry you the rest of the way. Sleep well and good night.